But first to this, the Small Business Administration suspending nearly 7,000 COVID-era loans in Minnesota, accusing borrowers of defrauding the government out of $400 million. SBA Administrator Kelly Loeffler posting in part this: after years, the American people will finally begin to see the criminals who stole from law-abiding taxpayers held accountable. And this is just the first state. President Trump saying there's been at least $18 billion stolen, vowing the United States will get this money back. The Oversight Committee announcing 2 upcoming hearings on the fraud, including one with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and AG Keith Ellison in February. I want to bring in the woman herself, U.S. Small Business Administrator Kelly Loeffler. Kelly, good morning to you. And talk to us about these actions, the 2 different actions. First, going after the fraud with the PPP loans, also suspending funding from the SBA to the state of Minnesota.
Well, that's right. Good morning, Cheryl. We are suspending funding to the state of Minnesota. I wrote a letter to Governor Tim Walz and said last week that we would be withholding the state millions of dollars from the state because there are simply no guardrails on taxpayer dollars. But the bigger picture is here, as soon as we found out following Thanksgiving weekend that there was massive fraud in Minnesota, we immediately went to look at pandemic-era programs, which we know were rife with fraud. And so we went and investigated. It only took us a couple days to find about $3 million in frauds from the indicted individuals that were listed, about 80 individuals. So we dug further. We picked up about 13,000 loans that were flagged from fraud. And as you mentioned, about 7,000 individuals in Minnesota now know that they will not be able to ever get loans from the SBA or disaster recovery funds because they have defrauded the federal government and our taxpayers. We're holding them accountable, and we will be sending those files over to federal law enforcement because this isn't just action to stop them from getting SBA support, but also to make sure that there are consequences for them, that there are prosecutions, and there's accountability.
Well, also, too, the SBA, the internal watchdog, this is 2023, estimated, and this goes to these COVID-era loans, that about $200 billion in potentially fraudulent loans in general had been handed out, 17% of total funds dispersed. Now, this is before, obviously, you took over the agency. But, I think we should remind people that for those loans, people were able to, these borrowers were able to self-certify that these loans were legitimate, self-certify, which seems ridiculous now looking back. How confident are you that we can somehow maybe claw back some of this funding?
Well, that's absolutely right. Out of $1.2 trillion that went out through SBA funds during COVID, now remember, these COVID-era loans helped millions of small businesses keep millions of employees on their payroll. Most were legitimate. But the fact is we had organized crime operating around these, like we see with the Somali crime ring in Minnesota. And so we have gone back through loans that the Biden administration tried to forgive that were known to be fraudulent. That's why we already had 13,000 that we knew had been marked as fraudulent. We're able to find quickly 8,000 of those and make sure that they cannot benefit from our services. But now, as I mentioned, we're going to do that state by state. We are going to make sure, now that we understand the breadth and the depth and the method of these crimes, that we hold more states accountable. And so we are making that commitment.
I want to kind of point to the wider administration push on this, not just from President Trump, but from several of the agencies, yours included. I had Congressman Mike Karadopoulos on with me on the program earlier. Here's what he wants to see happen in his approach from a congressional standpoint.
I'm a son of an FBI agent when they were tough, and they went after organized corrupt crime and destroyed the mafia of the United States back in the 1960s and 70s. We need to use the same vengeance here to take down this organized crime ring. And it's not just in Minnesota. They're hiding the ball in Wisconsin and California as well. Tim Walz is not going to tell you the truth in a congressional hearing. What we need to do is talk to an investigator and say, why did you turn a blind eye when you know exactly what was going on at a daycare center or these small business situations? It's because someone told them to turn a blind eye, and they stole not millions, but billions of dollars. We need to use the full force of the federal government, just like they did against the January 6th protest on Capitol Hill, and bring these people to justice in handcuffs.
And you know, it's not just, as President Trump mentioned on New Year's Eve, it's not just Minnesota we're talking about. California, Illinois, New York, widespread. Your reaction?
Well, that's exactly right. And that's why I'm so proud to be part of this cabinet where everyone, it's all of government approach, FBI, it's DOJ, it's USDA, it's HUD, HHS. We are all looking at it, and we are all committed to supporting President Trump and rooting out this crime, because we call it, as a euphemism, waste, fraud, and abuse, but it's lying, cheating, and stealing from the American people. It's time for it to end. But look, this is an example of the Democrat socialist welfare state. What they do is they look the other way. They see the fraud happening. It helps them politically. We have to end this. So that's the commitment across the Trump administration, to serve the American people and have accountability for these criminals.
A lot of work to be done, and the work begins today. And you began your work even before the end of the new year with your agency in particular. Let's talk about small business. The optimism index for small business, it did surge in November. The uncertainty index is a little up, but this is the latest survey from the National Federation of Independent Businesses. 53% of small business owners say the overall health of their companies in November was good. 11% said excellent. 64% reported supply chain disruptions were impacting their businesses to some degree. When it comes to the labor side of this, 50% of owners said that they had few or zero qualified applicants to fill vacant jobs in November. What are you hearing about that? Are you hearing from small businesses that they're having a tough time getting workers to come in and work for them?
Absolutely. You're exactly right about small business optimism being very strong. Expectations for 2026 are very high, particularly on the heels of the One Big Beautiful Bill, which is so great for small businesses and for workers, which is what they need. They need workers to have those incentives to come back into the workforce. You see labor participation rising, which is great for small business because their number one concern is lack of qualified employees. So we know there's millions of open jobs across this country, about 7 million. In the manufacturing sector alone, there's 600,000. We're doing Made in America again, finally, thanks to President Trump. And so small businesses are really spring-loaded for a fantastic 2026 if they can get the workers.
Before you go, you've said this before, but tax cuts, fair trade, deregulation are all going to drive economic growth in 2026. What's the outlook?
Well, deregulation is going to be a huge tailwind, because if you think about the excessive regulation that the Biden administration stacked on, trillions of excessive regulation that added red tape for small businesses, that's like getting another tax removed. So you get immediate expensing, you get the pass-through deduction, you get deregulation, fair trade, you get that workforce growing again. Small businesses are off to the races thanks to President Trump.
Before you go, Kelly, you fulfilled your promise. You have donated your entire 2025 federal salary to charity. You made this promise when you re-entered public office. Just to show our viewers who you contributed to: Texas Hill Country Flood Aftermath, West Virginia National Guard Foundation, Turning Point USA. Why was this so important to you to do this?
Well, like many of my colleagues in the cabinet, we're here truly for public service, and there's no greater honor than to serve in the Trump administration and to serve the American people, who I see every day as I go across main streets in America from Alaska to Maine. The American people are the hardest working. They're the most generous. They're taking on all the risk, whether it's farmers, small businesses, manufacturers, welders, waitresses. My commitment is to serve all the people of America. And I thought the best way to show that would to give my payback to nonprofits serving those, particularly in times of need, like the West Virginia National Guard, who suffered the loss of one colleague and another colleague who's recovering due to the horrific shooting in Washington, D.C. So just continuing to support the country in different ways.
Well, and continuing your work at the Small Business Administration. Kelly Loeffler, thank you so much for being with me this morning. Thank you so much for your time.